If every new crisis makes you say, I don't know if I can even believe in God after this, then you haven't reached your tipping point. Then every issue makes you question him. But once you are convinced that he is good and that he is loving and that he is just, then dreadful situations can come up and you can say, I don't know how this glorifies you, Lord, but if it does, okay.
Unapologetic from Premier Unbelievable.
Kathy, you and Tim have written and spoken really powerfully about the problem of suffering, particularly in relation to your own sickness. Now, I'm aware this is a really painful topic, so please don't say anything that you're not comfortable with. But how do you attest to the goodness of God in the midst of everything that you have encountered?
I think probably overall the most frequent question that has been asked of us in gab fests and after church Q&As, which we had after every service until Tim was preaching 4 times in a Sunday and he couldn't stay after the service, was the whole thing about, if God is a good God, why is there still suffering in the world? From what I understand, and I've heard Tim say this to people individually, and he's also preached about it, philosophically, the philosophers, the people, the heavy-duty Alvin planting a level people, say that's actually kind of died out as a philosophical question because everybody has finally realized that if there is a God big enough to be called God, it stands to reason that he might have purposes for suffering that are beyond our understanding, and telling us wouldn't help. We wouldn't get it. We wouldn't understand it. So there's no reason to assume just because I can't understand it that doesn't mean that there is a reason. So philosophically, that's kind of put the thing to rest. But Planting actually has a very funny anecdote about that. He says, we assume that God's reasons for why he allows suffering to continue in the world are St. Bernard's. And if a St. Bernard walks into your little camping tent, you would know it because it would be very crowded in there suddenly. But there's a bug over here, I don't know if you have them in England, called no-see-ums. They're kind of like midges.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for the translation.
Yes. In Scotland, I met midges. No-see-ums bite you, but you can't see them. So you know they're there, but they're not visible. So what if God's reasons are more like no-see-ums than St. Bernard's? And how dare you as a creature say, yeah, but I want to know. I mean, the verse that's helped me enormously with questions that I can't figure out an answer to, and I'll get back to suffering in a second, but I need to tell you this. Deuteronomy 29:29 says, the things that God has revealed are for us so that we may do them, but the secret things he's kept hidden for himself, which means there's 2 categories of information. One, that he's going to tell us because we need to know it in order to obey him. And 2, he's not going to tell us because we don't need it to know that in order to obey him. For instance, the huge battles that rage about creation, was it 7 24-hour days? Was it 7 epochs? Was that a theological poem? You know what? He's not telling, because he is never going to say, I would like you to obey me by whipping up a universe. Go ahead, here's the recipe. I put it right there. He's not going to give us the recipe because he's not going to give us the command to do it. He's told us lots of things that we're not very busy doing. And that's what we should be doing, rather than saying, I don't have the answer to X, Y, or Z. And therefore, I think maybe the best use of my time is to argue about it with people who have different interpretations. No, I don't think God thinks that's the best use of your time. Anyway, to go back to suffering. The goodness of God is something that you have to come to a tipping point in your Christian life. And by tipping point, I'm using the Malcolm Gladwell definition. If every new crisis makes you say, I don't know if I can even believe in God after this, then you haven't reached your tipping point. Then every issue makes you question him. But once you are convinced that he is good and that he is loving and that he is just, then dreadful situations can come up and you can say, I don't know how this glorifies you, Lord, but if it does, okay, I'll cry, I'll weep, I'll throw myself on you, but I'm not going to say that there's evil. I mean, Hebrews 12 tells us that hard things are going to happen to us, and they're going to be because God loves us and he wants to bring us closer to him. And Jesus told his disciples all the time, you're going to get persecuted. People are going to, my favorite one is where he says, people are going to betray you and hurt you and stone you and kill you, but not one hair of your head will be harmed. What? Huh? It means that you're going to be safe through it all, that it's going to be fine. I keep reminding myself with Tim's absence on the days when I miss him the most, that this is the very, 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 very shortest part of eternity that we're in now, and that the rest of it is long and joyful and glorious. And if I'm going to kick up a fuss because everything isn't going my way in this part, then I don't trust God at all. It doesn't matter what the issue is. Friend of mine, her house burned down and everything in it, wedding photographs, their china, everything. And they built another house, but it didn't have anything in it that they had kept for 30 years. But okay, go on, move on. God has asked things of people before, and never more than what he asked of himself in dying for us. And therefore, suffering is not really taken seriously as a serious philosophical issue. On a personal level, we have to say, this is meant for my good. I don't know how, but I have reached my tipping point, and God is good no matter what. So that's part of it. We are supposed to walk by faith and not by sight, but we rarely do that. And it's hard to remember to, because we see all the stuff around us, and that's looks pretty solid to us, but it isn't. It's a vapor.
I think one of the things that struck me really powerfully the last time I spoke to Tim, we recorded a session like this, and he said that he would never want to go.
I've seen it, actually.
Yeah, and he spoke so beautifully about the fact that he and you would never want to go back to the kind of prayer life and the spiritual life that you had before the cancer. Would you say a bit about that? Because I know that spoke so powerfully to so many people.
Well, it's in the same vein. It's God's fatherly goodness in saying, you need to shed all the accretions of idolatry that you have been collecting without even realizing it. You need to focus on me. You need to examine yourself more seriously than you ever have. Eternity is just around the corner, and you're not ready for it. So I think just the reality, I mean, I don't remember who said it, but it's quoted all the time. Death concentrates the mind wonderfully. Tim used to do funerals. He loved doing funerals because people who wouldn't give another thought to their spiritual life or God, etc., at a funeral, you kind of have to. If it's the right kind of funeral, he would mention the person who had died, but then he would just go on to preach a sermon about God and eternity and salvation, and people didn't dare not listen, because here was evidence right in front of them that one day they were going to die too. I had a friend in my Bible study, her father-in-law was dying. He was a lawyer, and she was trying like crazy to witness to him and talk to him about faith, and he was just brushing her off. And she finally said, Dad, you're going to need a really good lawyer pretty soon. And you don't have one. But Jesus is our advocate. So take him. He's your lawyer. He's your lawyer in front of God. I don't know what came of that analogy, but I thought it was a really good one.
That's great. Kathy, again, this is so, so difficult, but how do we respond to unanswered prayer? I suppose in this sense, particularly in relation to healing, because again, in that great interview that Tim very kindly gave to us, he said that he and you would pray for healing, and obviously that tragically didn't happen. So how do we respond to that, and how do we come alongside people for whom they're praying and they're not getting the answers that they so desperately want?
Well, there's no such thing as unanswered prayer, but sometimes the answer is no. And just like you have to say no to a child that wants to have 15 Oreos for their dinner, and you say, that would be really bad for you, you know? If I let you do that, that would be child abuse. That would be wrong. And if God doesn't give us the things we ask for, we have to reassess whether we're just treating him as a vending machine. I put in my prayer and out pops the answer. God answered many of our prayers whenever Tim was sick. Not ultimately the one where he was healed, but he lasted a lot longer than most people did with pancreatic cancer, and he had a lot of time to think and to work, etc. We actually we were not very well prepared for him to die because we didn't think he was going to. We thought the treatment he was getting, that he had gotten in June of 22, was going to work again in April of 23, and his body just couldn't sustain it. Really, it was what the issue was. But I remember Tim once said, if I thought God would answer every prayer that I prayed, I'd never pray again, because I'd be terrified of asking for the wrong thing. I mean, if I got every prayer that I ever prayed, I'd be married to 2 other people, and neither one of them would be Tim. So it doesn't bother me to have an unanswered prayer.
Kathy, you said you weren't particularly prepared for Tim's death. Again, please don't answer anything that's...
We weren't. The whole family wasn't.
Was there anything that you did do to prepare yourself? And is there any advice that you would have for those who are caring for a loved one who's undergoing palliative care?
No, because Tim never did go under palliative care. Tim had enrolled in a medical trial before he even had his first chemotherapy treatment, where they harvested cells and then bred them specifically for their cancer fighting abilities for his particular kind of cancer. So those were on the shelf the whole time he was getting chemotherapy. And we looked at that as sort of the fail-safe. Well, if chemo doesn't really do it, we've got the cells. And the first time that they gave them to him, it was miraculous. The people down at the NIH were practically running through the halls dancing, because every single tumor had disappeared, just melted away, blown up, except for 3 little tiny ones that were not of the same genome as the ones that they had bred these other cells to fight. So those were the ones that then reproduced, and they mixed up a new batch of cells, and they targeted those particular ones. But by the time that he got them, his body was just so worn down that he couldn't manage it. But all the while, we had that as a fail-safe in our background. If this doesn't work, that's going to be the thing that does it. And therefore, I don't think we were particularly prepared. We weren't thinking that this wasn't going to work. Oh, there's plenty of time. So that was not realistic, at least of me. Tim maybe had been more realistic, but I don't think I was. I kept thinking, no, don't have to worry about that. It's not a question that I can really speak to, because I was bad at it. We didn't.
Well, again, in that wonderful last recorded conversation that I had with Tim, he spoke of scanxiety, which I thought was a great word, that sort of terrible fear of waiting for test results. Is there any encouragement that you would give to those who are crippled by anxiety for whatever reason? I mean, people are anxious about all sorts of things in today's society, aren't they?
Yeah. Anxiety disorders are a real thing, a medical thing. And if you have a broken leg, you don't pray it to be healed, you go get a cast on it. So there are times in which medication is indicated. My sister has a progressive lung disease, which makes it very hard for her to breathe. And the more anxious she gets about it, the worse her breathing becomes. So her doctors recently put her on an anti-anxiety medication that she takes a very low dose of, but it's been very helpful. Don't neglect medication if it's going to be helpful to you. I mean, that everything isn't solved by prayer. God gave us the creation mandate to go out and explore all the things that are possible in the world, and one of them is medicine. So use medicine if you need to use medicine. Anyway, that's a side thought. Tim always said to trace your anxieties back and you will find your idols. And I think I can promise you that that's true, that the thing that you fear the most losing is the thing that you are depending the most on. And you need to examine how much of an idol that you've made that, whether you're trusting in the health of that person or having that job or, whatever the issue is, as the thing that's going to be what saves you rather than Jesus.
Kathy, how can we hold on to hope, do you think, even in the most difficult of circumstances?
We can't hold on to hope by ourselves, or if it's an indefinite kind of just, I wish to feel hopeful. We can hold on to Jesus, and he only knowing because he holds on to us. And that's what gives us hope, is that he has got us and he's not going to let us go. If you just want to feel hopeful and feel cheerful about your circumstances, there will be days when that's possible and days when it's not. But the hope that we have in Jesus is something that is not in question. He's preparing a place for us, and we're going to be with him forever. And this part of our lives is going to be nasty, brutish, and short. And we should use every opportunity we have to help other people navigate it. But we shouldn't mistake it for our home. I remember before Tim got sick, in fact, not long before Tim got sick, speaking to a friend of mine who's wealthy and she's got wonderful taste and she's had decorators decorate her houses, multiple. And I was saying, well, you have a lot of really nice stuff. I said, my stuff's not as nice as your stuff, but I like my stuff. It's old and it's frayed and I need to fix a few drawer pulls that have come loose. But I like the rugs on the floor. I like the rug in the bedroom that's worn through to the canvas on the back. You can't even see the design on the front. I like my stuff now. That's the opposite of what we're being told by all of the saints of the past, being weaned from the world, not putting our hope in the things of the world, which is exactly what I was doing. I like my stuff. I like the way my world has been arranged. I like the way my life has been arranged. I'm comfortable here. I'm happy here. And I mean, that's all you need to say for God to just blow it up to smithereens, because that's Psalm 33. The worst thing God can do for you is let you alone and let you be happy and content and satisfied, because then you'll never ask any of the big questions. You'll never ask any of the things that will lead you to him.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Unapologetic from Premier Unbelievable. For more shows, resources, and our newsletter, visit premierunbelievable.com.